Hello everyone and welcome back to Monsters of the Mind. As usual, I'm your host Mr. G. Today we're talking about the most famous monster of them all. Well, maybe not individual monster, but at least the species. Today we're talking about those fire-breathing giants known as dragons. The word dragon means serpent, and they were a species. If they were good or evil depends on their region. They lived all throughout the world, and nearly every mythology has featured them. Dragons are undoubtedly the most famous mythical creature, as basically every country who's had mythology has had a story dealing with an animal that, even if it wasn't explicitly called a dragon, had elements that could be considered draconic nowadays. The three main types of dragons include the European dragon, which are usually depicted as being quadrupedal reptilian creatures with wings on their back. Side note, this is actually biologically impossible as no known vertebrate has had more than 4 limbs naturally. Oh yeah, they can also breathe fire and are sometimes depicted as venomous. There's the similar wyvern, but instead of having front limbs, their front limbs are wings. So, yeah. Oh yeah, both of these creatures are also described as being very greedy and are known to hoard treasure and will kill anyone who comes near their piles. And the third most common type of dragon is the Chinese dragon. Now, the differences between Chinese and European dragons are almost night and day. While European dragons are typically described as looking vaguely lizard-like or crocodilian-ish, Chinese dragons look more like snakes with flags. Also, they don't have wings, but they can still fly. This is often described as being due to magic. Also, unlike European dragons, which were feared, Chinese dragons were actually pretty well respected for their power, and they were generally seen as pretty benign beings, although they could still do some damage if you angered them. And while European dragons are primarily associated with fire, Chinese dragons are primarily associated with the water. And much like how European dragons can breathe fire, Chinese dragons are sometimes depicted as being able to shoot water. With so many countries having dragons, it might make you wonder where they came from. The most commonly accepted theory is that dragons were based off of dug up dinosaur bones, and the idea of the dragon was made up to try to figure out what exactly they were supposed to be. Although if you ask certain other people, they claim that dragons are based off of sightings of late surviving dinosaurs or pterosaurs. And if you ask certain other people, they think that the word dinosaur was made to hide the existence of dragons. I wish I was joking, but I wasn't. Anyway, here's Vincent to talk about his experience with dragons. Hate to burst your bubble, but dragons are nowhere near as cool as the stories make them seem. They're not even that big. When standing on all fours, they're only roughly taller than a man, and they're about as long as a saltwater crocodile, or whatever they are. As for the three main types, the European dragons are known to be active predators, with their primary targets being griffins, unicorns, and other stuff that they can easily get their hands on. Although they prefer unicorns since griffins can and will act, and since griffins are known to fight back. Much like how lions prefer going after antelope rather than Cape buffalo. You know, something like that. And yes, they can indeed breathe fire. It's actually a pretty handy weapon, too. Wyverns, they're kind of like reptilian vultures. They're known to follow around European dragons and feed off their scraps. And yes, both creatures are indeed pretty greedy. They are known to hoard anything shiny and bring it to their caves. They actually make nests out of them, really. That's where they keep their eggs. As for Chinese dragons, they are a lot more benign. They're not completely harmless, since, like all animals, they prefer to not be bothered, and if you bother them too much, they will drown you. Funny story, one time I actually saw a goblin walk up to one of them near the banks, and it scared away the fish that the dragon was trying to eat, so the dragon picked the goblin up and drowned it. Yeah, they can, be pretty mad sometimes. Anyway, they're primarily piscivorous. They're known to hang out near the water and eat fish. It's quite fascinating to watch. Now let's look at the cards featuring dragons. This card features two types of dragons, the wyverns and the Chinese dragons. For the wyvern card, I don't really have much to say about it. All I'm going to say is that I'm confused why they didn't give the European dragon its own card, since it is the most famous monster. Maybe they thought it was too famous for these cards. I don't know. Anyway, those wings, I have to criticize those wings. Those look way too tiny. Like, that thing looks like it could barely lift itself off the ground, if you ask me. And also, it's breathing fire from its nostrils. I know that sometimes dragons are depicted with smoke coming out of them, but I don't think I've ever seen a dragon that actively shoots fire from its nose. This is... I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. As for the Chinese dragon, it's a fair bit better. They got the design pretty well. Although what I don't get is why they tried to give it a scary design. I know that I said earlier that Chinese dragons can get pretty scary when they get mad, but they're normally described as being very peaceful animals. And so the fact that they're trying to make it seem scary is a bit weird. But this isn't the only time this series has made pretty benign animals look scary. They do it quite a fair bit. I give this card a 9 out of 10 for slight fear-mongering. Alright, now it's pop culture time. And since dragons are one of the most famous fantasy creatures of all time, in fact, they're almost synonymous with the fantasy genre, it was incredibly difficult to pick a good enough selection that wouldn't get people angry in the comments section. Keep in mind my limit of how many appearances I can include, because there is no realistic way I can include every single appearance of a dragon. So don't get mad that I didn't mention this anime from the 60s that had a dragon in it or something like that. I don't care. So, without further ado, let's dig into these. Surprisingly enough, despite the title, Dungeons & Dragons doesn't actually Okay, I can't finish that sentence. Of course Dungeons & Dragons has dragons, and they have both the kinds on the cards, being both the Wyvern and Chinese dragons. Disney loves using dragons. In Sleeping Beauty, the main villain Maleficent turns into a dragon in the climax. They made a movie called Pete's Dragon, which is about a kid befriending a dragon. Mulan featured a small dragon named Mushu who helps out the titular character. Lewis Carroll, famous author of Alice in Wonderland, made a poem about a creature known as the Jabberwock. Which is a weird, vaguely draconic thing, but I feel like it counts since almost every adaptation of it considers it a dragon, so whatever. There's the video game character Spyro the Dragon. The Pokemon series has a type known as Dragon types, which feature Pokemon that are vaguely draconic, although some do stretch the definition a little. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit features a dragon known as Smaug, who serves an antagonistic role. The main villain of the Mario series is a dragon named Bowser. Or, I guess he counts as a dragon? I mean, he's a fire-breathing reptile, and people generally consider anything like that a dragon. You know what? Just like Mike Wazowski, he's here on a technicality. So, fight me if you want, but that's what I'm saying. The Godzilla franchise features the kaiju known as King Ghidorah, who is a three-headed dragon. And I guess in some circles, Godzilla could be considered a dragon too, but he's often lumped in with dinosaurs instead. DreamWorks has the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, which features tons of dragons, but the main one is a species called a Night Fury, whose name is Toothless. The video game Minecraft features a dragon known as the Ender Dragon as the final boss. The Shrek franchise features a dragon named Dragon. A dragon appears as a boss in Ark Survival Evolved. Ha! I can still talk about this series. You could not get me to stop bringing this series up. I will never stop bringing this series up. No matter how many topics I change, this will always find a way to weasel its way into my series. Oh yeah, I guess it also featured Wyverns. That's all for this episode of Monsters of the Mind. Join us next time when we go to the deep, dark, mysterious lake located in the mysterious country known as Scotland to try to find one of the most famous monsters that may or may not be real. Bye!